Zambia is well endowed with hydropower and other energy resources which could facilitate production of electricity for both urban and rural areas of the country. The country has an installed electricity generation capacity of 2,347 megawatts and undeveloped hydropower potential of over 6,000 megawatts. In the last few years, demand has been growing and it has outstripped supply.
Rural Electrification Authority is a government agency. It's a government institution that was created by an Act of Parliament, Act number 20 of 2003. Now, the essence of creating this institution was such that if you go back in time, in the mid-90s and late 90s, ZESCO, which is a national electricity utility company, was commercialized. Meaning that ZESCO started operating like a private company. And that took away a part of its function. And that function is the function of rural electrification. This is so because ZESCO now focused on commercially viable projects, which are in urban centers. So government realized that there was now a gap in terms of taking electricity to rural areas, because then ZESCO could not make profits if it had to undertake projects in rural areas, because these are costly projects we're talking about. So government deliberately put in place an authority, which is REA, as a special purpose vehicle to deliberately take electricity to rural areas. By and large, it's an institution that is more or less like a social institution. It doesn't make any profit. So from that angle, the mandate of REA was basically to create electricity infrastructure in rural areas.
The load growth is attributed to increased mining activities and development of the industrial base. The country is also endowed with abundant natural resources such as arable land, water, minerals and wildlife. With the available resource base, electricity along with other social and economic infrastructure such as roads and telecommunications could facilitate increased economic activities. In rural areas, electricity could be used for crop irrigation, agro-processing, small-scale mining and to facilitate tourism.
Now within that plan, there was also identification of the technologies to be used in electrifying these rural growth centers. And there are three main technologies that were identified. The first one and the main one is what we call grid extension projects. Now grid extension projects basically refer to extending the ZESCO grid from point A to an identified rural growth center. We've been taking most actually of our work is about grid extension projects. Then the second technology that was identified was solar energy. So there are areas where perhaps it is practically impossible to extend the grid because of the cost or because of the terrain or things like that. So these are some of these rural growth centers were targeted for solar electrification by solar energy. And in talking about solar energy, we have two types of approaches to electrifying areas using solar. We sometimes install standalone solar home systems on public places as well as in social places like church premises. And then recently we've been constructing solar mini grids, meaning that we have more or less a power station, a central power station with an extension of the power lines to the houses that have been identified. Then the third technology is construction of mini hydropower stations. You know that in the northern part of Zambia, specifically in northern province, Muchinga, Wapula, and northwestern province, there are a number of potential mini hydro sites that are supposed to be developed. And within the master plan that I'm talking about, we have identified about 21 sites that must be developed. Now these sites, once they are developed, for instance, we are developing a site called Kasanjiku in Munirunga, which is going to be our first mini hydropower station. This will be a standalone off-grid, or they call them off-grid power station, so supplying a local area within within that the sites that have been identified. We've undertaken some feasibility studies on most of these sites, and currently our role is to promote them for private partnership or participation. So those are the three technologies.
However, rural electrification faces many challenges, such as long distances from existing power stations to targeted rural areas, low population densities, high poverty levels, and low skills availability. These and other factors have contributed to continued low levels of access to electricity in rural areas of the country.
By 2030. So basically, that is what the rural electrification program is about.
Yeah. In terms of access to electricity, what's the percentage of the population that have access to electricity?
The average put together, the urban and rural areas is about 23%. It's a very, very small percentage. And that is also, in urban areas, obviously, the percentage is much higher. But if you put together the scenarios, rural areas and urban areas, it certainly comes down. Right now, in terms of access to electricity in rural areas, we are averaging about 5%, even after the implementation of the rural electrification master plan up to this point. There are a number of factors that are impacting on the access rate. Again, you will see that the populations are growing, and there are more areas that are being opened up for villages or settlements or things like that. So the expansion in terms of population settlement, in terms of population numbers, is also, it's a situation where you are increasing, the project is going on as planned perhaps, but then you have again the expansion in terms of settlement, in terms of population. So the average, sort of the access rate in rural areas tends to sort of dwindle. So and unless we put in a lot of investment in rural electrification program, we might not reach the levels that are targeted for. So that $50 million I'm talking about is actually, if we have that money as a requirement, perhaps we could be talking about it differently right now. Now, having identified that problem and sorting out the problem by putting in place this structure, government, with the assistance of JICA, technical assistance from JICA, went around the country. They went around the country to map out the country in terms of which are the target areas for electrification, and they came up with what is called the Rural Electrification Master Plan. Now, this Rural Electrification Master Plan has identified about 1,217 rural growth centers, or villages, so to say, for easy understanding, that were supposed to be electrified, or that are supposed to be electrified between 2008 and 2030. So, and these are spread across the country. It was a participatory process in that there was participation from all stakeholders, especially at provincial and district levels, in identifying these 1,217 rural growth centers. Now, that is the main plan that we have as far as rural electrification is concerned.
To facilitate implementation of the new policy, the government established a legal and institutional framework by enacting new legislation, namely the Electricity Act and the Energy Regulations Act in 1995. The Electricity Act provided for liberalization and regulation of the electricity sector, while the Energy Regulation Act provided for the establishment of an independent regulator so as to stimulate private sector participation and efficiency.
Our core has always been on policymakers, to lobby policymakers to increase the budget, to constantly up the budget for rural electrification, because the demand is so much, and it's even becoming heavier these days. So our core has always been, we've had sessions with Parliament where we lobby for funding, and also not just government funding, because we know that government has its own limitations in terms of its budget, because all the other sectors are actually calling on the same budget. So you would appreciate that government can only do so much. But one issue that we know can be much more effective is for the private sector to come into the electricity sector. If the private sector, if the private sector moves into the energy sector and specifically into the electricity sub-sector, that will make the program much more effective, because it is this investment that we need. If we see that we have a weakness or we have limitations in terms of government budgeting, I think the private sector can be a much more effective approach to rural electrification. We know that there are challenges with that, and the electricity subsector is not so lucrative because of the low tariffs. So the private sector, I mean, these are big business people, they want to make money. So if they can't have, if they say, if there is no, if they see that they can't make money, they will definitely not venture into. We've had what we are calling smart subsidies to encourage the private sector, because even the facilities that I'm talking about, they mean the solar mini grids, the mini hydropower stations. We are not, we cannot operate those. Our role is to actually construct this and then to partner with maybe the private sector to run these facilities. The Panta one that I'm talking about, the solar mini grid, is we've actually partnered with a local cooperative that is operating and maintaining that facility. So in a way, they act like a local ZESCO, so to say, within that particular area. So we are hoping that there's been a high-level discussion on the tariff, and going forward, if the tariff becomes much more attractive to the private sector to come into the electricity industry, then we'll see a much more effective rural electrification program. And I think that is the most important thing for us to entice the private sector to come into the electricity subsector. The mini hydro power sites that I'm talking about, we've done feasibility studies, and on some of them, and these are very costly feasibility studies. And our intention is actually to construct this if we can, and then bringing the private sector to operate this. So that sort of acts like a subsidy in a way to try to entice the private sector. But then again, it's an issue of the tariff we keep going back to. So unless that area is sorted out, then perhaps we'll see the participation of private sector investment into not just the electricity subsector in general, but also rural electrification. I think for me that is a very, very important point that we need to sing about on a daily basis. Yeah. The other important thing to note about the master plan, or the REMP, the Rural Electrification Master Plan, is it has also costed these projects. It has costed them. It has first of all phased them from 2008 to 2030. Each year there are specific projects that are supposed to be undertaken, and each year we are supposed to spend about $50 million ideally, if we had an ideal situation. That's the money that we are supposed to have for each particular annual phase, or for each year, for us to undertake all the projects that are listed in the master plan. So basically we don't get that amount of money because you also maybe appreciate that there are three main sources of funding for this institution, or for rural electrification projects. The first one is government appropriation, meaning that this is a budget that we receive from government that is appropriated by Parliament through the national budgeting system. The second source of funding is what we call electricity levy. Now, this electricity levy is a 3% that is charged on the money that you pay to ZESCO on your electricity bill. When you are paying your electricity bill, there's a 3% that goes for rural electrification purposes. Then the third source of funding is donor funding through loans and also through grants. The last thing perhaps I want to talk about the master plan is that at the time the master plan was being generated, the access rate to electricity in rural areas was only 3%. And you know that statistically, the majority of the people, Zambian population, actually resides in rural areas. And you can imagine this is where we are saying the access rate to electricity was 3% at the time of generating the master plan. The aim in implementing the master plan is that we need to raise the profile or the access rate from 3% to 51% by 2030. In other words, all things being equal with the implementation of the master plan, what we could be talking about by 2030 is that we would have increased the access rate to 51%.
The Rural Electrification Master Plan (REMP), which is the blueprint for executing this program, was developed. Prior to the finalization of the Rural Electrification Master Plan, the Rural Electrification Authority had been carrying out work in all the 10 provinces of Zambia on selected projects since establishment.
This year we started the process of procurement for 15 projects in 2015. And this was only concluded towards the end of 2016, and the contracts were awarded towards the end of 2016. So we'll be concluding, we'll be starting and we'll be concluding those 15 grid extension projects in different parts of the country. I earlier on mentioned that there are some dotted projects that started some as far back as 2012, 2013, 2014, even 2015. So we'll be concluding all those projects. This year we are actually not undertaking, we are only undertaking 3 new projects, grid extension projects. One of them is Milenge, Milenge district is not on grid up to this time. So we are completing that project. That's a new project for us. And then we also have a project in Nalolo district, a grid extension project. And also we have a project in Imono Shinmwense district. Now, those are normal grid extension projects. I was earlier talking about a mini hydro power station. We started the construction of a mini hydro power station at a place called Kasenjiku in Chifuntambuz area in Mwenirunga. Now this is a special project to us because this is the first time we're constructing a mini hydro power station. That mini hydro power station is going to be at 640 kilowatts at a cost of $8.7 million. Now that will be one of the main projects that will be undertaken into from last year. It was actually the groundbreaking ceremony was actually officiated by the Vice President. We'll run that project through this year and into next year, and we are hoping that by the end of 2018 we would have concluded with that project. But then again, there are 2 other special projects, so to say. I talked about solar mini grids. We did construct a solar mini grid in a place called Impanta in Zambia district, and that was our pilot project. That project is powering over 420 households and other facilities within the area. And that project cost us about 6.8 billion kwacha. So that project acted as a pilot project. Now from that pilot project, we have started 2 other solar mini grids. These will be of a bigger capacity. There's one project in Lunga district. Lunga district is in Luapula province again is almost an island. It's actually a cluster of islands, and to do grid extension has become impractical. So we are doing Lunga district using solar. It's going to be at 300 kilowatts. Already we have started with the civil works. The civil works alone are going to cost us somewhere around 3.3 million. We have started another solar mini grid at a place called Chunga. Chunga is in the Kafue National Park, and it's predominantly a Zawa training camp, or now they call them National Parks and Wildlife here. And this is going to power the training center itself with over again 400 households within the area. We are hoping that towards the end of this year we would have concluded also these 2 projects. Then the last perhaps thing we are working on for this year is to do internal wiring. Maybe for your understanding, what the projects sometime back used to do was we would create the backbone line, but the issue of internal wiring of structures was was the responsibility of the beneficiaries. And now we've seen that that sort of slowed down the access, because you would go there 2 years, people don't have money to connect to do internal wiring for their structures. So that has been incorporated in our project in the projects now. So this year we'll be doing internal wiring for all the grid extension projects, specifically for the 15 projects that we started from 2015. So that will also take a bit of our time. Right now there's a tender running for this thing. So basically that's the outlook for this particular issue. One of the biggest challenges is the issue of funding or resource mobilization, and I think this is the biggest challenge that we have, because the projects that we undertake, like I said earlier on, are quite costly. Grid extension is a very costly exercise. That is one of the challenges. I was giving you an indication of how much we need per year, but obviously we don't even get to a third of that money. So you find that in terms of implementing this project, we have projects that we have a backlog of projects, that we have not implemented. This year, our outlook, actually, if I tell you something, there are projects that we even started as far back as 2012, which we are yet to conclude, which we might be concluding this year. So the issue of funding has been very, very critical in implementing the program. The second challenge is the challenge of the institution being centralized. You will know that we only have one office, and which is this office in Lusaka. But our operation areas are in the remote areas. So the issue of being centralized has also been a huge challenge, especially in supervising these projects when they are being implemented. Ideally, it would have been much more effective if this institution it had its presence in provincial or even at district level. That would perhaps make it much more efficient to implement this project. The third challenge is the challenge of staffing capacity in terms of numbers of engineers. We have very few engineers there, and these have to operate at national level. So that too has been quite a huge challenge. These people have to travel in all corners of Zambia, and for them to be everywhere at any given time, it's almost practically impossible, especially when they're supervising these projects. So that too has been a huge challenge. I think generally those are the key challenges. Okay, we're also talking about, we look at some of the procurement processes that these projects have to be subjected to. And sometimes you get projects that get delayed, along the way, because you have to follow certain procurement processes. So yeah, those are some of the key challenges, and also the issue of just the terrain where we go. Sometimes you find for you to undertake a project, you actually have to create some sort of a road for materials to pass, for vehicles to pass. So you find some of these places where we go to, the terrain is also a huge hindrance.
It has been established that rural electrification plays a very key role and has a wide range of benefits to the people in these areas. Among the benefits are increased economic activities through the locals setting up businesses that are dependent on electricity, such as hair salons, barbershops, butcheries, etc., in the process earning a decent income. It has further been established that rural electrification also helps staff retention in key institutions such as hospitals, schools and other government institutions, in the process ensuring efficient public service delivery.
Well, the basic thing about rural electrification is that the underlying or the outcome, the objective of the program is to make the rural areas economically productive. Because you will agree with me that one of the key catalysts to development is a reliable source of energy, and in this case we're talking about electricity. Where this is lacking, where people do not have access to electricity, development is basically hindered. So the objective of the Rural Electrification Program is to make the rural areas more productive, much more productive, so that they contribute to such things as the GDP of the nation. And where we undertake our projects, actually, the first stage that we do is community mobilization. Community mobilization is very, very important because people are made aware of the essence of the project, why the project is being taken to those rural areas. We have seen where we've taken electricity change in the livelihoods of the people. You will find that people start engaging in local entrepreneurship activities such as carpentry, such as carpentry. They might have what are these vigayos and all those small businesses, saloons, phone charging, etc., etc. So you can see that there is an upliftment in terms of the economic scenarios before and after. And one of the key targets for us as we take this electricity are public institutions. Institutions such as schools, secondary schools, basic schools, institutions such as rural health centers or local courts or government administrative offices. Now, where we have taken electricity, say as an example, to a rural health center, there is definitely change in there. If you've been to some of these areas are so remote such that people don't want to work in such places. So one of the benefits could be the issue of staff retention, especially in schools and in rural health centers. And then we also have seen that in rural health centers, there is a change in terms of service delivery because then you have certain facilities. These institutions start acquiring refrigerators for the medicines, or indeed in some areas where you have incubation. And etc. etc. So there's a lot of change in terms of the operations of these institutions. Sometimes you get to a rural health center where people members of staff are operating under candle, or there's women giving birth under candle, which is very, very, very unfortunate. And in some areas you find people that have to access certain medicines, they have to walk perhaps to 100 kilometers or even 80 to 100 kilometers to access those medicines. And it's a difficult situation. Then in schools we have seen benefits such as the increased pass rate in pupils. The general motivation among the teachers. We have seen now we are in the information and technology era, and within the school curriculum there is also the aspect of IT, and we have seen some schools starting acquiring computers or IT equipment. So those have been some of the benefits. We have seen where we have agriculture that is based on rain. We've seen in some areas the issue of irrigation agriculture, which is very important. So those are some of the outlooks, so to say, if you compare some areas where there's no electricity and where we've taken electricity. Yeah.
For rapid economic growth that will help improve people's lives to be realized, it is of utmost importance that priority is placed on the need to electrify rural areas so as to speed up their growth and economic development. This will make it possible for the majority poor to come out of the poverty trap and hence help in accelerating Zambia to middle income status.